up the bench, aiming to bust their fool skulls with it as they clumb through the winder, but just then another feller run up. "Wait, boys!" he hollered. "Don't waste your muscle. I just seen Santry down at the Topeka Queen gambling with the money he'd taken off that derned cowboy, and he give me the key to the door." So they abandoned the winder and surged round to the front of the jail, and I quickly propped the bench agin the door, and run to the winder and tore out them bars which is already loose. I could hear 'em rattling at the door, and as I clumb through the winder, one of 'em said, "The lock's turned, but the door's stuck. Heave agin it." So whilst they hev, I run around the jail and pick up the guard's shotgun where he dropped it when he run off. Just then the bench give way inside and the door flew open, and all them fellers tried to crowd through. As a result, they was all jammed up in the door and cussing something fierce. "Quit crowding!" yelled Hansen. "Holy catamount, he's gone! The jail's empty!" I then up with my shotgun and give 'em both barrels in the seat of their britches, which was the handiest to aim at, and they let out a most amazing squall and busted loose and fell head first into the jail. Some of 'em kept on going head down like they'd started and hit the back wall so hard it knocked 'em stiff, and the others fell over 'em. They was all tangled up in a pile, cussing and yelling to beat the devil. So I slammed the door and locked it and run around behind the jailhouse. Hansen was trying to climb out the winder, so I hit him over the head with my shotgun and he fell back inside and hollered. "Help! I'm mortally injured!" "Shet up that unseemly clamor," I said sternly. "Ain't none of you hurt bad. Throw your guns out the winder and lay down on the floor. Hustle, before I gives you another blast through the winder." They didn't know the shotgun was empty, so they throwed their weapons out in a hurry and laid down, but they weren't quiet about it. They seemed to consider they'd been subjected to cruel and unusual treatment, and the birdshot in their sterns must have been a stinging right smart, because the language they used was plumb painful to hear. I stuck a couple of their pistols in my belt. "If one of you shows his head at that winder within an hour," I says, "he'll get it blowed off." I then snuck back into the shadders and headed for the livery stable. The livery stable man was reading a newspaper by a lantern, and he looked surprised and said he thought I was in jail. I ignored this remark and told him to hitch me a fast hoss to a buckboard whilst I saddled Captain Kidd. "Wait a minute," says he. "I hear tell you told Ace Middleton you aimed to elope with Gloria Lavender. You taking this rig for her?" "Yes, I am," I says. "Well, I'm a friend of Middleton's," he says, "and I won't rent you no rig under no circumstances." "Then get out of my way," I said. "I'll hitch the hoss up myself." He then drawed a buoy, so I clinched with him, and as we was wrastling around he sort of knocked his head against a swingle tree I happened to have in my hand at the time, and collapses with a low gurgle. So I tied him up and rolled him under an oats bin. I also rolled out a buckboard and hitched the best looking harness hoss I could find to it. And them folks is liars which is going around saying I stole that there outfit. It was sent back later. I saddles my hoss and tied him on behind the buckboard and got in and started for the Silver Boot, wondering how long it'd take them fool buffalo hunters to find out I was just bluffing and weren't lying out behind the jail to shoot 'em as they climbed out. I turned into the alley which run behind the Silver Boot, then tied the hosses and went up to the back door and peeked in. Gloria was there. She grabbed me and I could feel her trembling. "I thought you'd never come," she whispered. "It'll be time for my singing act again in just a few minutes. I've been waiting here ever since I paid Santry your fine. What kept you so long? He left the Silver Boot as soon as I gave him money." "He never turned me out, the low-down skunk," I muttered. "Some friends got me out. Come on, get in the buckboard." I helped her up and give her the lines. "I got a debt to settle before I leave town," I said. "You go on and wait for me at that clump of cottonwoods east of town. I'll be on pretty soon." So she pulled out in a hurry, and I got on to Captain Kidd. I rode him around to the front of the Silver Boot, tied him to the hitch rack, and dismounted. The Silver Boot was crowded. I could see Ace strutting around chawing a big black cigar and joking and slapping folks on the back. Everybody was having such a hilarious time nobody noticed me as I stood in the barway, so I pulled the Buffalo Hunter's .45s and let bam at the mirror behind the bar. The barman yelped and ducked the flying glass, and everybody whirled and gaped, and Ace jerked his cigar out of his mouth and bawled, "It's that darn cowpuncher again! Get him!" But them bouncers had seen my guns and they was shying away, all except the scar-faced thug which had hit me with the bat, and he whipped a gun from under his vest. So I shot him through the right shoulder and he fell over behind the monte table. I begun to spray the crowd with hot lead, free and generous, and they stampeded every which way. Some went through the winder, glass and all, and some went out the side doors, and some busted down the back door in their flight. I likewise riddled the mirror behind the bar and shot down some of the hanging lamps and busted most of the bottles on the shelves. Ace ducked behind a stack of beer kegs and opened fire on me, but he showed poor judgment in not noticing he was right under a hanging lamp. I shot it off the ceiling and it fell down on his head, and you ought to have heard him holler when the burning aisle run down his worthless neck. He come prancing into the open, wiping his neck with one hand and trying to shoot me with the other, and I drilled him through the hind leg. He fell down and bellered like a bull with its tail cotched in a fence gate. "You darn murderer!" says he passionately. "I'll have your life for this!" "Shut up!" I snarled. "I'm just paying you back for all the pain and humiliation I suffered in this den of iniquity." At this moment a bartender riz up from behind a billiard table with a sawed-off shotgun, but I shot it out of his hands before he could cock it, and he fell over backwards hollering, "Spare my life!" Just then somebody yelled, "Halt, in the name of the law!" and I looked around and saw it was that tin-horn marshal named Santry with a gun in his hand. "I arrest you again!" he bawled. "Lay down your weapons!" "I'll lay your carcass down," I responded. "You ain't fitting for to be no law officer. You gambled away the $5 I give you for grub, and you took the fine money Miss Laventer gave you, and didn't turn me out, and you give the key to them mobsters which wanted to hang me. You ain't no law. You're a dern outlaw yourself. Now you got a gun in your hand same as me. Either start shooting or throw it down." Well, he hollered, "Don't shoot!" and throwed it down and hoisted his hands. I seen he had my knife and pistol stuck in his belt, so I took them off of him and tossed the .45s I'd been using onto the billiard table and said, "Give these back to the buffalo hunters." But just then he whipped out a .38 he was wearing under his arm and shot at me and knocked my hat off. Then he turned and run around the end of the bar, all bent over to get his head below it. So I grabbed the bartender's shotgun and let bam with both barrels just as his rear end was going out of sight. He shrieked blue ruin and started having a fit behind the bar. So I throwed the shotgun through the roulette wheel and stalked forth, leaving Ace and the bouncer and the marshal wailing and wallering on the floor. It was plumb disgustful the way they wept and cussed over their trifling injuries. I come out on the street so sudden that them cusses which was hiding behind the hoss trough to shoot me as I come out was took by surprise and only grazed me in a few places, so I throwed a few slugs amongst them and they took to their heels. I got on Captain Kidd and headed east down the street, ignoring the shots fired at me from the alleys and winders. That is, I ignored 'em except to shoot back at 'em as I run, and I reckon that's how the mayor got the lobe of his ear shot off. I thought I heard somebody holler when I answered a shot fired at me from behind the mayor's board fence. Well, when I got to the clump of cottonwoods, there weren't no sign of Gloria, the hoss, or the buckboard. But there was a note stuck up on a tree which I grabbed and read by the light of the moon. It said, "Dear Tehano, your friend must have been kidding you.